τα οποία έζησε. Μιλάει πρώτα απ' όλα για το πώς αντελήφθη για πρώτη φορά ότι θα υπάρξει ελληνική κρίση. Μιλάει ακόμα για την περίοδο του Γιώργου Παπανδρέου. Το αν οι Γερμανοί ήθελαν να μας τιμωρήσουν με τη συμμετοχή του Διεθνούς Νομισματικού Ταμείου στο πρόγραμμα διάσωσης της Ελλάδας. Μιλάει ακόμα για το παρασκήνιο στην περίφημη Σύνοδο των Κανών. Στη συνέχεια μιλάει για την περίοδο Σαμαρά, για το αν η Ελλάδα έπρεπε να πάρει τότε μείωση του χρέους και γιατί δεν την πήρε. Και βεβαίως μιλάει για τη σχέση του με τον Αλέξη Τσίπρα. Μια σχέση που άρχισε με πολύ δύσκολες συνθήκες και βέβαια εξελίχθηκε και κατέληξε σε εκείνο το περίφημο καλοκαίρι του 2015. Ο Γιουνκερ μιλάει για το παρασκήνιο του δημοψηφίσματος, μιλάει για τη συμφωνία που επετεύθη και ακόμα απαντάει στο ερώτημα αν υπήρξε κάποια διασύνδεση ανάμεσα στη συμφωνία των Πρεσπών και τη συμφωνία που πήρε ο κ. Τσίπρας. Όλα αυτά λοιπόν θα τα δούμε απόψε μαζί. Ο Κλοντ Γιουνκερ στο ΣΚΑΙ.
It happened several times in the past. If it happens once more in the future, we are putting at risk the credibility of all the figures and all the framework we are moving in. The game is over. We need serious statistics.
Das ist das Mindeste, was man sagen kann. Sehr angespannt. Die griechische Regierung wird Maßnahmen ergreifen. I didn't ask the member states of the euro area to prepare national contingency plans, but of course we have to consider all kinds of events, but our working assumption is that Greece would stay as a member of the euro area. It is our common political willingness to do everything possible in order to maintain Greece as a member of the euro area.
Be member of the euro area, and if the Greek government, all the parties involved, had not done what they did do, knowing that this was leading to dramatic consequences in the life of very numerous ordinary people, Greece would have been Argentina before Argentina became Argentina once again.
I know that as a leader of the European Union, you spent a lot of time with Greece. But I want to ask you, when was the first time you realized that Greece was going to be a problem?
That was during the Karamanlis time, because then I discovered, being a president of the Eurogroup, that something bad, unfortunately, was happening in Greece. But the Greeks, I mean the political class in Greece, was not really aware of that.
Did you tell them?
I always said to him, listen, Greece has a huge problem when it comes to public finances, when it comes to public debt, when it comes to reforms which are needed and which are not done. And I continued with George Papandreou, who used to be my good friend, and then later on with Anthony Samaras, and then with Tsipras. I had the same message to the different Greek provinces. Sometimes I had the impression that I was the only one to know about the Greek problem, but I felt that something was occurring at the horizon which would not be without any kind of Greek counter-reaction which could turn into a real crisis.
And do you think that was also the Commission's fault at that point, that there was no strict supervision?
It was not so much the fault of the Commission, it was the fault of the Council of Ministers. I remember that the Commission, that was a Prodi or Barroso Commission in 98-99, the Commission asked the permission of the finance ministers to control the statistics of member states via Eurostat. And unfortunately, I was amongst those saying that, no, the Commission has enough powers, let member states control their own figures. That was a major mistake, because had the Commission the right to control the figures and the background of the figures. It would not have been possible for Greece to enter the euro area on a wrong basis. It was not the fault of the then Commission, it was not mine, it was the mistake of the Council, and I was part of the Council.
Did you warn Papandreou before he was elected about the problem that was coming?
I had contacts with Papandreou. I told him that something bad was happening there, and when he was elected, he immediately came to Luxembourg in order to have a meeting, and then we were discussing in a tough way, because I was chair of the Eurogroup during that time, the problems Greece was facing.
Had he taken some strict measures early on when he was elected, would the situation be averted?
But the problem in Greece is always the same. You are changing governments because parties do think that they will do better than their predecessors, and there is no objective transition during that time between governments. Neo-Democratia, thinking that PASOK was worse than them, PASOK thinking that they had to do exactly the opposite of what Neo-Democratia was doing. It was always a strange situation. It has improved since then, because there is a kind of total opposition, of total bipolarization between the right and the left in Greece. Sometimes I had the impression, I don't want to blame the parties for that, because in Greece this seems to be normal, that they were not so much in charge of the well-understood interests of the country, but of their party. The parties in Greece did not do well.
Now, when Greece got into trouble during the Papandreou time, how difficult was it to convince the Germans, and especially Merkel, to go ahead with the...
No, but the problems we had with Chancellor Merkel did not arise and occur so much during Papandreou's time, but later on.
But she was the one who insisted on having the IMF as part of the program, right?
Yeah, but that was in 2010. I remember a visit she paid to me as a Luxembourg Prime Minister to Luxembourg on the 10th of March 2010, and she heavily insisted on having the IMF being involved in the whole process. I was not in favor of that, because I think that the European Union had means and instruments enough, in fact we didn't, to solve the crisis together with the Greek government. Because if California has a problem, California does not go to the IMF, but California goes to another address in Washington. That means the administration. Why did we take in the IMF? Because the Germans were heavily insisting on that. Schäuble was not, Merkel was. And then the whole thing started with this Troika. I was never a fan of the Troika, because the IMF took a role. Greece is a country with very noble people. Greece never was treated during that time in the right way, because people in the rest of Europe, mainly in the so-called Orthodox northern part of Europe, were considering that the Greeks are lazy, that Greeks are corrupt, whereas corruption is a real problem in Greece. But ordinary people are noble people, and my whole approach to Greece was to try to have a better understanding of what was happening in the daily lives of Greeks. And I changed the mood in the way that I treated Greece, taking into account the dignity of the Greek people, which is noble people, and which in European history, I don't have to explain that, played a major role. Nothing we are is possible without the Greeks who were, and to some extent with the Greeks as they are now, and others didn't understand that. I don't know why. One day, someone I'm not admiring too much, Giscard d'Estaing, said that the place of Plato is not in the second division. I think for once he was right.
We did an interview back then, and what you said is that both the strict fiscal measures and the participation of the IMF was an effort of the German government to punish Greece for its past.
I never was part of these players wanting to punish Greece. Why should we punish Greece? We should have punished before that the Greek governments because they were not behaving well, but the Greek people. I always had the idea that we are not dealing with Tsipras, who became a good friend of mine, or with Samaras, who still is my friend, but with the Greek people. It's not about governments, it's about countries, it's about nations. And Greece is a very, as I said, very noble nation. Don't forget that behind the scenes, behind the conversation between the Commission, governments and the Greek authorities, there are the Greeks. We are in charge of the interests of the Greeks.
But there was, you think, a group who really wanted to punish Greece in some ways?
No, but I said I was never part of that.
No, I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about...
No. Did the Germans want to punish Greece? I'm not so sure, but they gave that impression.
You were there...
Mainly due to the public opinion in Germany, Bild-Zeitung and the right parts of the CDU, they wanted to put an example. Never put an example when it comes to nations.
Did you ever talk to Merkel herself about this?
Oh, very often. The main problem I had to deal with when I was president of the Commission was with Greece, of course, with Alexis Tsipras and others, yes. Difficult moments, full of tensions. But the main problem and my main duty was to convince the other governments of the euro area to trust Greece. It was easier to convince Tsipras that he had to deliver than to convince other governments in Europe to trust Tsipras and the Greeks.
You were there in Cannes in the G20.
Yeah. In the margins.
And I think that was the moment when Papandreou proposed a referendum, and Merkel suggested that you stay behind with the Venizelos to create a plan B, and you said, no, I'm not participating in this. Is that the correct recollection?
I was never in favor of a plan B, neither in Cannes nor later on, although we had a plan B in our pockets, but I never mentioned it because had I mentioned it, it would have happened. If the President of the Commission is saying we have a plan B, don't worry, Greece would have had to leave. So I was never in favor of a plan B, but during these Cannes meetings, there was a lot of legends about that meeting. I strongly insisted when talking to George Papandreou and to Evangelos Venizelos, don't have this referendum, it's bad. Financial markets don't understand. I'm not driven by financial markets, but I know that they exist. I don't know them personally, the financial markets, but I know that this force did exist. And this force, this camp of the financial market, was not Greek-friendly. Although financial markets have totally failed. Back in '91, when I was heading the Intergovernmental Conference leading to the Maastricht Treaty and thus to the Economic and Monetary Union, I was proposing, together with Philippe Maistat, the Belgian minister, Jacques Delors, the president of the Commission, Pierre Bergoglio, the then French finance minister, to have a so-called economic government of the euro area. That was opposed by the Dutch, by the Germans, by others, because they believed that if something would go wrong, financial markets would immediately punish a government not acting in the line with the Stability Pact and all this stuff. That never happened. Only when the first symptoms of the Greek crisis became visible, the financial market reacted irrationally, heavily against Greece. So financial markets, although I don't like them, they played a major role, and I had always in mind, let's pay attention to these financial markets which are behaving in a very irrational manner. And so I asked George Papandreou and Evangelos to skip this idea of having a referendum, which they finally did.
Is there a moment you remember from that meeting? Because I know it was a very dramatic meeting in Cannes.
I was split myself between jumping when others were attacking Greece on the Greek side and the need I felt to tell my Greek friends that they have to change the avenues they have taken. That was always my problem. Am I in favor of Greece or am I in favor of the others? That very day, I had to tell them, don't have this referendum because this will not be understood by financial markets nor by the other European governments.
Was this the first time that Grexit was sort of entering the conversation or no?
No. But what we told Papandreou and Evangelos that very day was that this would be seen by the other Europeans as a referendum in favor or opposed to the European Union as a whole. It was not in the perception of the other Europeans about Greek programs and stuff like that. It was thus Greece want to be part of the European Union. That was the perception of the financial markets too. So it was a dangerous moment.
When Samaras comes in as a prime minister, what was the view here about him?
He used to be a member of the European Parliament, so he was known to the Brussels circles. He had a good reputation and he tried to introduce a certain number of reforms, what he did, but he was not supported by the Greek public opinion because the Greek public opinion was not really aware about the problems the country was facing.
Once he achieved the primary surplus target, which was difficult, there was a commitment before that, that the debt would be cut. Why didn't this happen?
Yeah, because other Europeans didn't want to have this debt cut. The IMF always wanted to have this debt relief. And in Germany, in Austria, elsewhere, this was seen as a giving too much merit to the beginning of the Greek adjustment process. I remember that I had very difficult meetings with the French, with the German, when I was chief of the Eurogroup, with the IMF, with the private banking sector on all this. And finally, the decision which was taken was not to offer this possibility to Greece. I think, after reflection, that this was the right decision to be taken because it promoted inside Greece the idea that they have to solve their problems first by their own.
I'm not satisfied with the developments in recent weeks. I don't think that we have made sufficient progress, but we'll try to push in the direction of a successful conclusion of the issues we have to deal with. I will make a certain number of proposals to my friend Alexis, and then we'll see what will happen. I am totally excluding a failure. I don't want a failure. I would like the Europeans to grow together. This is not the time for division, this is the time for coming together.
Je dirais aux Grecs que j'aime profondément. Aux Grecs que j'aime profondément. Il ne faut pas se suicider parce qu'on a peur de la mort. Il ne faut pas se suicider parce qu'on a peur de la mort. Il faut voter oui, indépendamment de la question posée, que les autres Européens, les autres citoyens européens ignorent. Il faut voter oui, indépendamment de la question posée, parce que les citoyens grecs responsables, honorables et à juste titre fiers d'eux-mêmes et de leur pays doivent dire oui à l'Europe. It's a compromise. There are no winners and no losers. I don't think that the Greek people has been humiliated, and I don't think that the other Europeans were losing their faith. It's a typical European arrangement.
Now, Alexis Tsipras comes into power.
Yeah.
Was there a panic here when he was elected?
I'm never panicking because democracy is democracy, so never blame democracy. But democracy is leading to results for sometimes understandable reasons. There was panic in the Commission because people thought this is a left-on guy, a former communist or a communist. But I have a different view of the left-hand side of the European landscape. Because I'm a Christian Democrat, but I'm not really center-right, but more or less center-left. And I knew by experience that if someone is coming with his ideas, given the historical context of his country, he's trying to develop his ideas, but if he's intelligent, and Tsipras is highly intelligent, he will immediately see that there are certain ideas which don't work and don't operate. And since day one, I had a very good, also personal relation with Alexis Tsipras, who was like Samaras and like Mitsotakis today, a patriot. And take patriots seriously because they are believing that they are acting in the best interest of their nation and of their country. Sometimes they are making mistakes, but as they are patriots, and as all of them were true Europeans, including Tsipras.
I remember very well that scene when Tsipras comes here, you grab him by his hand,
Yeah.
he hesitates, and then you bring him in.
Yeah.
What was like that first meeting? What was the conversation about?
It was friendly because he thought that I was a stupid conservative politician in Europe. He knew before that this was not the case, but he did still believe it. And so I had to reassure her. I said, okay, listen, Alexis, I will help you, but you have to help me too. And that was the beginning of a serious friendship, I have to say. Because, as I said earlier on, we have to deal with governments, with prime ministers, with parliaments. But it's always about the people. So don't enter politics if you don't love people.
Was he sort of threatening then? Was he living in his own planet, or was he very realistic at the beginning?
He was not very realistic at the beginning because he has his own ideas. He was coming out of a huge campaign against neo-democracy and all this. And so he really believed that his approach was the right one. And I told him, yeah, okay, you have right elements in your analysis, but they are not sufficiently developed in order to convince the others, so you have to change them. And he changed his views. His domestic explanations very often were very different from the conversations we had, but I had full understanding for this because you have to manage your domestic situation. And I told him I want to help you, and he told me I'm not part of the problem, I'm part of the solution. So that was the basis of our basic understanding.
Did you talk to Merkel at that point about him?
I very often talked to Merkel, not only about Alexis Tsipras, but about Greece. I was always explaining the Greek reality to Merkel. She didn't know about that, although they have a huge embassy in Athens. But she didn't know the reality of the Swedes. I knew the reality of the Swedes because I was informed by friends I had in Greece, by Greek journalists, by others. So I had a better understanding of the daily living conditions of the ordinary Greeks. You have to have that in order to find the right answers.
How did you find out about Tsipras' referendum? Did he call you, or?
No, he didn't inform me about his referendum. That was the only major mistake he made, not the only one, the only major mistake he made, because he didn't inform me about that, or at the very last minute. I don't remember that exactly. I didn't like that idea, because as was the case with Papandreou, this was seen and by the financial markets and by the other Europeans as a yes or no to the European Union. And the proposals he submitted to the meditation of the Greek people were not the proposals who were anymore on the table. These were proposals, some IMF and others did issue weeks and months before, that was not the state of play during that moment, so I didn't like the idea of having the Greeks voting on something different than what was on the table. And he knew perfectly well that he asked the Greeks to vote on something which was no longer on the table. So I didn't like the idea.
Did you tell him that?
Yes.
What was the response?
He explained to me that he needed a kind of new mandate. The matter of fact is that after the referendum, he did not exactly what he proposed during the referendum. And I had that impression before. And during the referendum, I did a press conference, which was not very useful, but I had to say what I had to say. I tried to build bridges into the future. I knew that he could not deliver on that. And I knew that for Greek and European reasons, we had to reconnect with Tsipras and his government. So I didn't want to destroy the bridges.
I know that at some point during the week before the referendum, you tried to give him a new proposal, right? Which he rejected.
Yes, but I don't remember day by day what was happening during that period. But I think that we tried to convince him to skip the referendum because there were new old proposals, not old proposals which were submitted to the Greek people, but old new proposals.
So what was the other mistake here? You said he also made other mistakes.
I had some difficulties to understand why at his very beginning he was entering a coalition with that other party. I didn't like. Although I did like some of their representatives, but I didn't like the idea to turn to the right. Why? Why someone who was supposed to be extreme left was entering a coalition with a party which was not the one I would have liked to cooperate with.
Now, you found out about the referendum results, and what was your feeling when you found out?
Yeah, but I was not surprised, because Tsipras did submit, as I was saying, to the meditation of the Greeks, something which was no longer on the table and which would have been negative to some extent, to a large extent, for Greece. So I was not really surprised that the no was 61% or something like that. I was not surprised nor impressed.
Now, who negotiated the deal with him where he fired Varoufakis and then he came to Brussels to negotiate?
I had so many meetings, at least 12.
No, but I mean, before he came on the phone, was it Hollande, was it you? Who talked to him about firing Varoufakis before he came to Brussels?
No, but we never asked him to fire Varoufakis. And Varoufakis in our negotiations, apart the negotiations which took place in the Eurogroup, where he did not well. I met Varoufakis, I think, for 10 or 15 minutes. Varoufakis, in fact, didn't play a major role. And I had so many meetings day and night with Alexis Tsipras, as I had before with Samaras. And respecting Greece, we tried to find a solution to the Greek problem. And I always wanted to limit the Greek problem to Greece, not accepting that this problem would expand to other, also weak countries in the euro area. So it was not only Greece. Even in the field of economic monetary union, we had the Polish crisis. We had the Polish crisis beyond the financial crisis, but we had to limit the problem to Greece, not accepting that this could expand to others.
Negotiations, 2015. First of all, you think Merkel or Schäuble or both had Grexit in their mind as a set goal?
It changed from time to time. Sometimes Merkel gave an impression to be in favor of Grexit, although she was never pushing too heavily into that direction. Schäuble was publishing a non-paper asking Greece to leave for a certain period of time. the euro area, I was strongly against that, because once you have left, you have gone. It's easy to leave, although this would have entailed for Greece huge problems, but it's very difficult to re-enter. So I was strongly opposing that view.
And what was that plan B that you had prepared?
No, we had a plan B, but as it never worked, why should I explain plan B?
Well, people are curious. Was there a plan B, or was this sort of a...
I had a plan B in pocket because we needed one, but I never believed that we should use it.
But let me ask you, had Greece left the Eurozone and the plan B had been implemented, what would reality look like in Greece had this happened?
It would be worse. Greece would have been left alone, fighting with their own instruments, which were to some extent inexisting given the high level of the public debt. No. If Greece had left, the situation would be worse.
Tell me about those 17 hours of the negotiations. I mean, the moments you remember here in Brussels after the referendum.
It was difficult. But all those apart, some of them having played a role in this, were slowly but surely discovering that Greece had to be kept as a member of the euro area. Mainly for Greek reasons, because the opposite would have been terrible for Greece. And the Greeks, as a whole, they always were in favor of the single currency of the euro and in favor of the European Union. So why should we have felt the need to disappoint the overall majority of the Greek people? So we did not do what the financial markets and some idiots were expecting us to do.
Tell me a bit about those negotiations. Was Tsipras being very difficult? Was Merkel being difficult?
No, but it's not only about Merkel. There is this general idea spread around over Greece that Merkel was the only one we had to deal with. That was not the case. Merkel was not the most difficult person in the room. Others were by far more difficult. So the Germans gave the impression inside Germany that they are tough, that they are severe, that they are rigid. They were, but at a lesser extent than others were. My main duty was to convince not the German government only, but governments, plural. Greece had few friends during that period, apart the Commission.
Did Tsipras look defeated after he accepted the deal with the primary surpluses, the pension cuts, and so on?
On the pension cuts, things have to be seen with more nuances than they were seen during that period of time in Greece, because I was not as heavily insisting on pension cuts than others were, mainly the IMF, because these are poor people. No? Those we were cutting the pensions, not to the extent asked by others, IMF and so on. These are really poor people, so I was never in favor of having this kind of punitive approach to people who were not responsible for the situation the political class has led them to. So, no, he didn't feel disappointed, because he knew that the Commission was ready to provide another 35 billion for social purposes, for growth, and so on and so forth. Greece was never left alone, at least as far as the Commission is concerned, and France was very helpful.
The treaty which has been concluded between two countries, not between two governments. The governments were the instruments of what had to be done, and I don't think that this can be put into question after the next Greek elections. A treaty is a treaty.
On a voulu empêcher la Commission d'agir en faveur de la Grèce.
Je me rappelle les longues nuits avec les gouvernements Samaras, Tsipras, où nous avons essayé de résoudre le problème grec. Et nombreux étaient les gouvernements qui ne voulaient pas que la Commission s'en occupe. Je me rappellerai toujours des coups de téléphone de plusieurs premiers ministres qui m'ont dit « Occupe-toi de tes affaires ». Nous avons redonné à la Grèce la dignité qu'il convient de lui donner. Trop souvent et trop longtemps, on a piétiné la dignité du peuple grec. Et j'ai voulu rétablir l'ordre des choses en redonnant à ce peuple tous les titres de noblesse qu'il mérite.
I want to ask you later on, he was given a bit of slack in terms of the pensions, when he increased the pensions a bit. There's this information, whatever, in Greece, that this was somehow tied to his agreement on the Macedonian issue, the Prespers agreement.
I mentioned the North Macedonian problem with Tsipras and with the North Macedonian Prime Minister, but mainly with Tsipras because he was the main element of any possible compromise. But don't make the mistake to confuse the two issues. I was mentioning that, saying I'm doing what I can for Greece, but Greece has to do something for the European continent, for the situation in the Balkans, which Northern and Western Europeans don't understand because they don't know what the Western Balkans are about. And he did what he had to do with a huge amount of courage. But I never said to anybody in the European Union, we have to help Greece when it comes to their public finances because they are opening the gate for a compromise with North Macedonia, because I knew that this Macedonian question was a very dramatic one in Greece, mainly in the northern part of the Republic. So I was talking with Tsipras on that issue, but never mixing the two issues. And maybe it helped when it comes to the Greek budgetary situation. I don't know. I don't know. Do you really think that the population of the northern part of Finland knows what it is about with North Macedonia, Thessaloniki, Greece? I don't think so.
Were you ever worried that Greece would implode and that would become a serious security situation with Turkey during this crisis?
I always, in my talks with Erdogan, was taking the point of view of Greece and of Cyprus. It's more or less the same. And I always explained to Erdogan that Greece and Cyprus, being a member of the European Union, our natural place is on their side. I never liked the idea of having these drillings in the Mediterranean. I was trying to solve the Cypriot problem. I was paying at the very beginning of my mandate several visits to Cyprus. I was receiving in my office at the Commission the President of the Republic of Cyprus and the leader of the Turkish minority, who became a good friend of mine. I'm highly disappointed by the fact that they didn't find the courage to bring this thing through, because the last 5 years, in fact, were the last chance to bring the Cypriot issue to a good end, because the youngsters, both in the north and the south, they are used to that situation. They don't think that this problem has to be solved. If this problem is not solved now, it will never be solved. And if this problem will not be solved now, it will create huge problems on the island.
I want to ask you, do you think Tsipras really changed Greece in terms of getting rid of the oligarchy, of the corruption, of the different problems in the public administration?
The public administration in Greece was very weak and still is very weak. Mitsotakis is doing a lot to strengthen the public administration. The weakness of the public administration is one of the major weaknesses of Greece, for ununderstandable reason. Corruption is a still existing problem. I'm not overestimating the phenomena, but I know that it does exist on all the levels of society, and this has to be brought to an end. This is a poison. I know that the now government is trying to put an end to this, as Tsipras was, but a lot of things have still to be done. I'm not blaming Greeks for being corrupt, I would never say that, but I know that corruption does exist in Greece, not only in Greece, but in Greece. Given the problems of the country, time has come to put an end, a definite end to corruption in Greece.
Mitsotakis is trying very hard to lower the primary surplus target.
Yeah.
And he's hopeful that this will be done by the end of the year. What's your advice to him?
As I'm no longer president of the Commission, I'm not giving public advices which could harm the views of the now Commission.
Is it a realistic target on his part?
I think that the primary surplus, being the one it is, has to be taken under review.
Are there any heroes and any villains in the Greek story?
The Greek people is a hero.
Any villains?
Some politicians who didn't do the right thing in the past.
Κυρίες και κύριοι, φτάσαμε στο τέλος αυτής της συνέντευξης. Νομίζω ότι έχουμε ακόμα πολύ δρόμο μέχρι να μάθουμε όλο το παρασκήνιο, μέχρι να φωτιστεί όλη η αλήθεια γύρω από τη μεσολάβηση ανάμεσα στο 2010 και το 2015. Ειδικά, μάλιστα, έχουμε ακόμα πολλά να μάθουμε για εκείνο το κρίσιμο καλοκαίρι του 2015. Πήραμε όμως σήμερα μια γεύση από το παρασκήνιο. Σας εύχομαι καλό βράδυ και καλή ξεκούραση.